Welcome to Direct Supply's Continuing Education webinar series. Direct Supply offers monthly webinars on a variety of topics throughout the year. The topic for today is Managing Legionnaire's Disease in Senior Living. My name is Robin Malik, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. Please note, the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary depending on the particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting with qualified legal counsel. Today's webinar will be presented by Bill Pearson and Brian Waymire. Bill Pearson is a certified water technologist, CWT, and Legionella risk assessment and risk management subject matter expert. He has over 40 years of experience in water treatment, industrial management, and quality assurance. Mr. Pearson has been notably involved in committee leadership and development of Legionella guidelines and standards, including ASHRAE Standard 188, as well as AWT and CTI Legionella documents. He has extensive experience guiding senior living and other healthcare facilities with water system remediations and implementations of water management programs to comply with CMS requirements and follow ASHRAE 188 standards to prevent Legionnaire's disease. Brian Waymire is the CEO of Innovative Water Consulting. He has over 15 years of experience in senior living facilities, water treatment, industrial management, and quality assurance. Mr. Waymire has been notably involved in mentoring senior living facility owners and administrators on staying in compliance with CMS mandates while following ASHRAE 188 standards. He has extensive experience guiding senior living facilities with water system remediation and implementation of water management programs to prevent Legionnaire's disease. His work includes creating comprehensive, effective, and compliant water management plans for hundreds of facilities across the country. And now, please welcome Bill and Brian.
Thank you, Robin. We appreciate it. And just to give you a quick update, Bill is pretty much the foremost expert in water management plans and one of the original architects of ASHRAE 88. Just so we have that out there, he is a phenomenal resource and is a huge part of our team. So, Bill, you have anything to say before we want to start?
No, I think we got a bunch to put out there in front of them, and I'm looking forward to this. First of all, a frequently asked question format between you and I to the audience, but more importantly, an opportunity for them to have a Q&A session after we finish.
Awesome. Yeah, and this was brought to us a little while ago by Direct Supply because we field questions, Bill and I do, every day, all day, about water management plans, what CMS has requested of the senior living and the skilled nursing world, and, along with testing. So this is going to be kind of a quick 40-minute overview, and our goal is to leave about 20 minutes at the end for questions. So please make sure that you ask as many questions or send as many as you can to Robin, because we are here for you today. So that kind of covers what the forward is. This presentation is led by Bill and I. We're going to talk about Legionnaire's disease, how it is caused. We're going to answer some questions about ASHRAE Standard 188 and what your local authorities have in jurisdiction is. The Department of Health is going to talk about, or what they're going to want to see, including your surveyors. In the background, kind of why we're here today, I'm sure everybody knows, is the CMS mandate that came out in June of 2017. We're going to speak a little bit about that as we go through here today. And like I said, Bill, one of the original architects and the chair of the ASHRAE 188 committee for many, many years and is still on the committee to this day. The CDC we're going to get a little bit of statistics. There's been a massive rise in confirmed cases of Legionnaire's disease, and we'll give you a little bit of background about that. Responsible corporate stewards. This is a big deal for building owners and building managers to do this, to do what CMS requires of you, but also to do it what we call the correct way, because we'll get a little bit more of that as we go through this. And finally, senior living communities, what can you do to protect your buildings and everything as we go through there? So that's kind of the background. I'm going to turn it over to Bill. He's got some really good slides, and I'm going to go back and forth on 3 of these slides after he talks a little bit about Legionnaire's disease and some other stuff in the United States. But, Bill, it's your floor.
All right. Thank you. I get to show some neat slides. I'm a visual person, and I think a picture, as they say, is worth 1,000 words. But things really, really changed less than 4 years ago. We're coming up on 4 years since the ASHRAE Standard came out in 2015. Subsequent, there was an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in the Bronx of New York, South Bronx of New York City, that captured literally everyone's attention, certainly the nation's attention, if not worldwide. And at the end, there was 18 people that died, and unfortunately another 130 plus that came down with this Legionnaire's disease that we'll be describing in great detail. But that put a lot of things into motion. The very next year, the CDC came out with some statistics that they've had, but for the first time they put them out in a chart, and they showed, look at this. This has been going on for quite some time. So the chart you have in front of you right now is literally the latest, and it shows that we have experienced in the last 15, 16 years a 550% increase in the incidence of the disease. And I actually put in red at the very top, just got this information a few days ago, the cases in 2018 are significantly over the cases that were reported in 2017, so it continues to be on the rise. Now, there's the next three slides we want to show in sequence. They're maps of the United States. We're going to stay on this first one. Don't get lost in any of the numbers, the information. This is the reported cases of Legionnaire's disease in the U.S. per state and the incidence in that state, meaning the number of cases per 100,000 population. So the first one is 2007, and we'll go to 2012, 5 years later. And then we're going to go to 2017, 5 years after that. And I'm going to ask Brian to go back to the first slide. And what you're going to see when I ask him to advance again to the next two slides, watch what is happening across the U.S. and within any given state. The light states are getting dark, and the dark states are getting darker, meaning their incidence of Legionnaire's disease is on the increase. So, Brian, let's see this. Boom, boom. Now, at the same time, you will get a chance to see these red states or these very dark states where we have the highest concentration, and that shouldn't be too surprising. They're in the oldest parts of the U.S., certainly the Northeast, where we have a lot of aging infrastructure, and we'll be talking about later on. But I just wanted to get this off. Those three maps showing how the increase is across the United States. So we're going to start some questions and answers. These are questions we get all the time. Literally, we're going to start from the beginning and from the basics. And so I'm going to answer a question, and then I'm going to ask Brian to help me out and do the second question, and we're going to kind of go back and forth like that. Hopefully, we will cover a lot of information in only 12 questions, and then we're going to be able to open it up to the audience and get into what we maybe didn't get to cover. So first of all, what is Legionnaire's disease? Well, you can see from the question slide, there's a few pictures on here. And by the way, a lot of these graphics come right from the CDC from a toolkit that they came out with that year after the outbreak and the release of the ASHRAE 188 standard. And this toolkit, if you aren't familiar with it, just Google CDC, Legionella, and toolkit, and you'll get it. It's free. And it's a very great aid for the water management plan writing that is part of ASHRAE 188. So they start right off. What is Legionnaire's disease? We know it's a bacterial pneumonia. We could go all the way back to the infamous Bellevue Stratford Hotel in Philadelphia, where the outbreak occurred then, that really brought this to attention and resulted in the CDC finding out what was causing this kind of strange pneumonia. It wasn't any other type of pneumonia that they had experienced. They were ultimately able to culture the bacteria, and it turned out to be a bacterium that they named Legionella. And so at the end of the day, I want to start instead of calling it Legionnaire's disease, it got that name because it was a convention, American Legion Convention in '76 in Philadelphia, where the disease struck to the attention of 220-some people sick and unfortunately 34 dying. But we did find out that it is pneumonia. At the end of the day, it is a bacterial pneumonia caused by the bacteria named Legionella. So I call it appropriately Legionella pneumonia. So we always get asked, along with what is Legionnaire's disease, well, how prevalent is it? And this is that kind of tip of the iceberg response here. We really don't know because many cases are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And the CDC reports 25,000 cases annually in the U.S., but other estimates are much higher, as much as maybe 100,000 cases are occurring. We know that pneumonia is not uncommon whatsoever, and Legionella pneumonia is not the leading cause of pneumonia. That would be a pneumococcal or streptococcal, but it is like the third leading cause of bacterial pneumonia, and so it is out there, and I think you saw from the chart that we're finding out year after year that it is not this obscure disease that's only in a couple states or a couple places in the U.S. and at very low numbers. It is quite different from that. So the important thing, though, is as a pneumonia, it is a deadly disease. There is a mortality in general, roughly 1 in 10 or 10% overall will succumb to this pneumonia. And when it is contracted in a healthcare facility, an incredible statistic, 1 in 4, 25% will die from the disease. So I think we ought to go to another question, and I'll let Brian, I'm going to ask, well, let's do it this way, Brian. I'll ask the question, you answer, and then after you answer this one, you ask me a question.
Deal.
So, Brian, how do you catch Legionnaire's disease?
Well, I wish I could say very carefully, but that's usually not the case. Legionnaire's disease is a waterborne disease, and that's why we'll talk about these water management plans as we move through this Q&A session today. The easiest way to think about it is by inhaling. You have aerosolizing water droplets. So in other words, choking, gagging, aspirating. You guys I know everybody's walked past a fountain and in the hot summer days, and that's that mist. Well, that mist is that aerosolization of those water droplets that gets inhaled into your lungs. And then if it has that Legionella bacteria in it, that's how you would actually inhale or get Legionnaire's disease. What I also like to say, and this is another huge question that Bill and I get all the time, is this disease contagious? It is not contagious. It is strictly waterborne, and it does come from your water systems in your buildings. And then last, outbreaks. The CDC, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 2 or more is considered an outbreak. Is what the CDC's definition of an outbreak is for Legionnaire's disease. And some authorities having jurisdiction or local health departments, and Bill and I deal with this on a daily basis also, have different definitions. So I will always very much tell you to go out and ask your local health department what is their definition of an outbreak. But it is that these risk factors, and you can actually see on that third bullet point in this slide, the risk factors, these are where aerosolization of that water droplet comes, and that's what we call our risk factors. Cooling towers, and I just want to put this little misnomer out here. Cooling towers is an estimate of 25, it causes about 25% of the disease or of the outbreaks. It's actually potable water systems. So this water in your building is responsible for about 75% of the outbreaks. We're going to talk a little bit about hot tubs and whirlpools, potable water showers and faucets. Showers are something that we need to pay a very big attention to. Ice machines, physical therapy water, medical devices, and I always say, for instance, CPAP machines. You wouldn't think it, but they are using water from your potable water system. Okay, Bill, so we're going on to the next question, and I'm going to ask this to you. What are the symptoms of Legionnaire's disease?
Well, this was actually an easy one since we've defined Legionnaire's disease as a pneumonia. So it's got the typical symptoms that you have associated with a pneumonia. You're going to have a cough and a fever. In fact, a very high fever is not uncommon, 104 and even higher in the throngs of it. And the chills and the aches and the shortness of breath and all of these things to go along with it. So I hope you got to see the little graphics here. Again, these come from the CDC. And so our symptoms then are very much those that you would associate with a pneumonia. They can come on rather quickly. This becomes important when we talk about the exposure when you Legionnaire's disease or the Legionella pneumonia typically shows itself within 2 to 10 days of exposure to the bacteria. And, Brian already touched on exposure, and that would be, the transmission of the disease via a water aerosol and some susceptible person, what we call a host, that inhales it, breathes it in, or otherwise gets it into the lungs. So those are the symptoms. This was an easy question and a short one. Let's get into some really good information, because now we know what it is and kind of, how you get it and what the symptoms are. So, Brian, touch a little bit more on who is most likely to get Legionnaire's disease. I mean, early on you said, gosh, if you have a little misting water out here, we've all walked under them, and I'm sure there's been millions of people that walk under these. Are we having millions of cases of Legionnaire's disease?
Well, Bill, that's a great question, and as we have discussed earlier, we really don't know how many cases of Legionnaire's disease. It's kind of an open book because of the testing and the education behind Legionnaire's disease. However, CMS came out with their mandate, and the reason they came out with their mandate is they were seeing a rise in uptick, and they're trying to do something to reduce the hospitalizations and with Legionnaire's associated cases. And they said, well, we went out to we have this U.S. standard. It was actually a proposed standard at the time. It wasn't actually a standard. Is that correct, Bill?
Not till summer of 2015.
Correct. So it was proposed at that time. So it was something that was, buildings did, and they were on the preventative or on the cutting edge of preventing Legionnaire's disease. So CMS came out and said, we're seeing a higher incidence of Legionnaire's disease or Billy diagnosed cases. So what we always say is, who's most likely to get Legionnaire's disease? It is what we call a individual susceptible in people who are 50 years or older, have compromised immune systems. So people under immunosuppressant treatments like chemotherapy, organ transplants, weakened immune systems, chronic lung disease, COPD. Those are the type of people that are at the most risk. But I will put this, and Bill and I always say this, even if, those are the highest risks, and of course those are the highest risks, of course, within hospitals and skilled nursing facilities and critical access hospitals, which the CMS mandate actually outlines as who needs to have a water management plan in place. Bill and I always say this. However, approximately 25% or 1 in 4 cases of Legionnaire's disease occur otherwise in healthy individuals. So it can be someone who is a star athlete can still get Legionnaire's disease. So, Bill, that was a little bit more involved, but the next one is, this one is right up Bill's alley. How is Legionnaire's disease diagnosed, and how is it treated?
Yeah, great, and thank you, Brian. And you did a great job on really a tough question when you said who's most likely to get Legionnaire's disease, because we do get lost in the fact that everything we read about it is, well, you got to be old, infirm, and sick, and on your last leg, so to say. Yes, that is the majority. But we need to realize that there's other factors involved. There's genetics of an individual, and there's also the genetics, or what we call the virulence of the actual Legionella bacteria that can cause the pneumonia. And we see this statistic. It's just out there. About 1 in 4 cases of Legionnaire's disease are in otherwise healthy people that don't fit the profile that you so well described. So now, I guess I'm trying to avoid this one because this is a big question. How is Legionnaire's disease diagnosed and treated? So there's a lot in this one question, and we'll start with the diagnosis. I kind of like the graphics on this question slide because, it really shows you what it is. It's pneumonia. We've all probably seen this typical X-ray. Your lungs should be clear. That's where air is being exchanged. But if you have fluid in your lungs indicating an infection, like a pneumonia, then you get a very big, prominent shadow. So we see that, and so it's diagnosed very much like pneumonias are. But as I said earlier, there are other types of pneumonia. First of all, there's viral pneumonias. Then there's the other bacterial pneumonias. So in order to be diagnosed as Legionnaire's disease, you have to culture, or you have to discover or have some other diagnostic evidence that the bacteria, the Legionella bacteria, are in the system. So without getting into the weeds of this, I like this area, but I also like your graphics. The very first one shows what's known as a urinary antigen test, a UAT. This is a quick and very, very specific. It's done in 15 minutes, where you check you look for antigens, reaction from a urine sample, but it only detects one species and even one serotype. We hadn't talked about that yet, of species of Legionella. That's called Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1. Fortunately, that's the one species and serotype that causes about 80% of the disease. But if you get a negative UAT, that doesn't mean you don't have Legionnaire's disease. It just means it's not caused by that very specific Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1. So what the medical community is getting used to now, especially in an outbreak situation, you got to go beyond that UAT test, and they'll get a sample from the patient, the suspected Legionnaire's disease patient, and they can culture the bacteria. And so that little slide, I think we're all familiar with cultures. You have agar, but for Legionella, it's a very special BYCE, a buffered yeast charcoal extract, which is required to grow it. This takes time. These samples have to be sent to a very qualified, specific lab, and then it's got to grow. It's slow growing. Then it's got to be identified and quantified. But this will let you know if it's any one of the 60-plus species. Yes, I said 60. Legionella has a large family. Pneumophila is the main one, but there are 60-plus other identified species, and so that can be done. We don't have to worry about there is a blood test, but it's really not useful because it takes many, many weeks, actually a couple months. You have to have multiple samples to see if you've got a certain antigen exposure that's increasing. So it's either the urinary antigen test or culture or some other way of identifying the fact that the bacterium causing the pneumonia is indeed Legionella. And so we'll just leave it at that. Once I've been diagnosed with something bad, I want to know, hey, can we treat it? That's the good news. Legionnaire's disease, Legionella pneumonia can be treated with antibiotics, but it does require some special antibiotics. That's what didn't happen back in 1976 when they were going, hey, all these American Legion veterans, this looks like pneumonia. It's all the symptoms, so let's give them some antibiotics. And they did. They gave them penicillin, amoxicillin, and they remained sick. And the worst ones continued on and even died. So that particular antibiotic is not effective against Legionella, but we do have what we call the higher up antibiotics, the macrolides, the quinolines, azithromycin, a very popular macrolide. These antibiotics have the ability to get in to where the bacteria are residing within cells and effectively treat it. It's just very important to get diagnosed quickly as possible and put on the proper antibiotic. Even then, the pneumonia can be very nasty, as they say. You may not respond right away, depending on the exposure and the other factors we talked about earlier, the susceptible host. And many Legionella pneumonia victims find themselves faced with hospitalization and likely weeks in ICU. So it's a very, very tough pneumonia. So, Brian, I almost got into the weeds there. So now we know a lot more about it. We do know we can treat it, and it's key to diagnose it right away. So I want to avoid it in the first place. I don't want to get it and have it diagnosed and then treat it. I want to kind of stay away from it, or hopefully places where I'm going, other people know about it and are going to keep me from being possibly exposed to it. So where can Legionella grow and spread?
That's a great question, and Bill, that's probably the biggest question that we get all the time. And if you look in the middle of this slide, I'll talk about risk factors here in a second, but if you looked in the middle of the slide, it's the optimal temperature range growth for Legionella is between 89 degrees and 108 degrees. And I know a lot of, probably everybody on this call or everybody on this webinar has problems keeping their temperature, or they have scald protection legislation in place so they can't keep their water temperatures very high. So this is always going to be a big risk factor for all of our clients. We talk about it every day, and for residents of your buildings. There are such things as thermostatic mixing valves, but those are also have to be maintained to keep those temperatures where they are. So, Bill, that was a great question. So cooling towers is, like I said, I stated a little bit earlier, are responsible for about 25%, give or take a little bit, but it's those potable water systems that I talked about earlier, which is the water that is in your building that's used for human consumption, so potable water systems. It grows best showers. So, we're all trying to save water nowadays. So shower has some of them have restrictors on it. So you're restricting that flow. And stagnant water in low-flowing areas is where Legionella will also grow, and it's called biofilm. It kind of grows in layers. So showers and those restricted holes, and if you have scale buildup on those showers where the water is no longer moving through those shower heads. I will always say this: showers are always where we usually find it when we do our investigations, is in those showers. Hot tubs. Hot tubs is actually broken out separately in the ASHRAE 188 standard, along with decorative fountains and cooling towers. Those are a big deal because of the water doesn't get turned over a lot. So decorative fountains, you're using water over and over again. They have to be treated with disinfectants and biocides, and then hot tubs have to be treated like a pool. But hot tubs are always warm. Remember that optimal temperature range, 89 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. And the question everybody always asks me is, where does this come from? Well, I hate to tell you, your municipal water system is actually supplying the Legionnaires bacteria to your building. It's usually in very low amounts, and most of the time it's undetectable amounts. But when it gets into your building and it grows and it builds that biofilm, that's when you start having those risks of actually having something in your building. And Bill touched on it a little bit earlier, and we're going to move on to our next question, but is infrastructure. We have a lot of infrastructure, especially on the East Coast, where this country actually was formed in old pipes, and we're having a lot of water main breaks. And I'm going to ask Bill a quick question. I think he has the answer on top of his head. How many water main breaks did we have last year, Bill? Did they average it out?
I was amazed when I got into researching this years ago about water breaks and disruptions, in our municipal waters are a common daily occurrence, probably with the statistic I'm about to tell you occurring every minute through the United States. There are, and please, if you want to find out, you can always Google. Check this out. There's 600,000 water main breaks annually estimated in the United States. That's a large number, but I think the important point here that we want to kind of summarize this slide, we're spending a little bit of time on this, and I think it's worthy of it because we want to know where Legionella comes, where it can grow and spread, and you did a great job on that, Brian. Again, these graphics, I like the one on the left. It's right out of the CDC toolkit. It kind of shows you a building that could have a cooling tower or could have a hot tub on the premises, even a decorative fountain. It certainly has the potable water that's supplying the showers and the sinks and maybe ice machines and as you said earlier, the other equipment. But an important thing is Legionella grows best in warm water that is not moving or is stagnant, or you'll hear us talk about is captured in dead legs, and does not have enough disinfectant. Think about that. Low flow, low disinfectant or no disinfectant, and optimum temperature. So that's the problem of this bacteria that does originate. I just want to say this one more time. It's a natural inhabitant in our environment. It's in our lakes, our rivers, our streams. Most warm water environments, you'll find it. If you had a ditch, a water ditch, a ditch full of water on the side of the road, you could probably sample it, and you could probably get some Legionella it will be in very, very, very low numbers, maybe not even culturable, but when it's given the opportunity to find safe harbor and grow in the biofilm and nice temperature and no disinfectant water, and that's what our premise plumbing systems provided. That's why this whole ASHRAE standard is about building water systems associated, with Legionnaire's disease when they find the favorable conditions. So we really beat that one up a little bit, Brian, but I think it was worthy of it. So
I agree.
Now we've got all this background of information. So what is key to preventing Legionnaire's disease? And I guess that's my question. And so, from the graphics, you see a couple things we've already talked about, the ASHRAE Standard 188 on the left, and the co-document that was put out by the CDC, and that's exactly what it is, the CDC toolkit that I referenced. It came out in June of 2016, and it was updated slightly in June of 2017. What it did was take the engineering language of ASHRAE 188 and really put it into layperson's terms and practicality with those great graphics you've been seeing throughout this presentation. And these are the two documents that the CMS actually called out. And we'll get to CMS in just a minute because that was an extremely important, I started to say legislation, it's not quite that, a directive. They called it a memorandum. But when the CMS talks, about everyone listens. They control the purse strings. So they have expectations, and they called out consistent with the ASHRAE 188 standard and the CDC toolkit. So those two documents are important, and so the key to preventing the disease then is to have all this information that we've just kind of learned about Legionella. We know what it likes, and from that we can kind of tell what it doesn't like. And so we look for those places in our buildings. And so the key is really, and ASHRAE 188 spells this out, it's the building owner. The building owner sometimes delegates to the managers to maintain our building water systems that we now know could have conditions conducive to allowing this bacteria that can get into our systems from municipal water, yes, from treated water, but it's in low numbers where it's probably not a problem, but when it gets into larger numbers where it can grow. So the key to preventing it is to manage our building water systems to reduce that risk of growth, spread, and transmission. We've really seen, although it's not the major source for many years, actually decades, the cooling tower was. Expected that, but as Brian already pointed out, it's less than a fourth. But the cooling tower industry is doing a great job. They are improving their drift eliminators, which if you could eliminate any drift, if you could eliminate all drift from a cooling tower, meaning the aerosolization, then it would not be a high risk at all. It would not be a source. So I digress there just a moment. I think it's important that we understand preventing Legionnaire's disease may not just be throwing chemicals at something or even filtering it. We can try and get our temperatures, as I say, keep your hot water hot and keep your cold water cold. Don't give that sweet spot where the bug can grow. And then certainly, I'm almost going to read this on this slide, certainly prerequisite is the education and the training, like you're getting right now, to gain fundamental and necessary knowledge about not just the bacteria and the disease, but this risk management process. So I always tell my audiences, folks, don't get scared away because we're talking about pneumonia, a disease and death. You don't have to be a medical doctor, a PhD microbiologist or epidemiologist, to understand the basics and to help formulate what we can do practically. If a cooling tower also, I keep using that, but, a cooling tower, if it's not cleaned on a regular basis, so I could even go back to potable water systems. If you have a water fountain or even an ice machine that's got filtration, if they're not maintained according to the manufacturer's recommendation and cleaned and all, you're going to allow Legionella to grow. So we have to have our building owners, they have to develop an effective water management program, certainly in our healthcare industry, in our senior living environment, and this is the audience that we're addressing. Certainly, we've got a CMS mandate to do that. That's going to be key to preventing Legionnaire's disease.
Nice job, Bill.
I took a little time on that one. I think we're getting these important questions, but we're also getting up to where we need to give our audience some time. So we'll not fly through the remaining, but they kind of can develop from what we've already talked about. So I got a question for you, Brian. So what is a water management program? I used it a lot there a minute ago and said this is the key to preventing Legionnaire's disease. So what is a water management program? Or I know we need another acronym in our lives, what's become known as the WMP.
Well, Bill, great question, and we've really learned from the first slides and the first question all the way up to where we are now. We've learned about Legionnaire's disease. We've learned about where it grows. We've learned about how we can contract Legionnaire's disease. But what you probably really want to know is, we talked about the water management plan a little bit in the last slide, but what we really want to know is, what is a water management plan and how can we build one out, or how can we have a very compliant, and I will always say this, a compliant and a practical water management plan. So what we want to do is the ASHRAE Standard, like I said, written by Bill and his team on the ASHRAE board of the 188, have developed this standard, and the standard is now up to 2018. And Bill, we always say this to all of our clients, this is either a living document or under continuous improvement. It always is being changed. Something is always going to be some new standard, some new science, something. So it is changing constantly. So one thing that you need to do is be familiar with that standard. It is, Bill, 38 pages now, or is it a little bit longer?
No, actually, it's still less than 20, but remember, it tells us what to do, but not necessarily how to do it.
How to do it, correct. So what we're doing is that water management plan is a written program or a written plan, basically finding the risks in your building, outlining your potable water system and your non-potable water system, if you have that in your building, and what to do to minimize the risk of Legionella growth and proliferation through your building. Like I said, you'll see that CDC toolkit, and you'll see that ASHRAE Standard. Developing and maintaining that water management program follows, it's a multi-step risk management process. So what you need to do is you would have to go through your facility and do a risk-associated assessment, or a risk assessment is what we call it here at our company. I think that's what it is pretty much across the board, is what in your building is a risk, and what can we do to minimize that risk in that building. And I will say something, and Bill, I think will always agree with me, and the CDC puts this in writing. They say if you do everything 100% correct, there's still a 90% chance that you could get this in your building. But what we want to do is really reduce this disease, and that's what Bill and I are really, really a big, huge proponents of, is reducing this disease and actually doing something for your building. And this is the least expensive, but the biggest key to reducing the risk of Legionella in your building. Anything else to add on that one, Bill?
Okay, you scared me for a second, and I know you're talking like me really fast. I think the CDC said, if you do everything all you can, there'll still be probably a 10% chance. I think you said 90. You had me scared for a second.
Yes, I meant a 10% chance that you'll still get it.
Yeah, I don't want to scare the audience away. Because it is tough. You're managing an organism, and when you look at the complexities of our water systems, our premise plumbing, and of bacteria and how they grow and biofilm and all, won't get into the weeds, it is tough. And when we find a system that has been colonized with bacteria, it can be really rough, to what we call remediate it and get it out. So that was a tough question, Brian. So we know what the water management plan is. That was the ASHRAE 188. That's what came out of that 10 years of development by that committee, and it's a process. It says the general consensus throughout the World Health Organization and others is if we follow a risk management process, and that's what I get to talk about. What are the key elements of a water management plan? And folks, we don't have time to have a course on 188. Maybe we'll say that for another webinar, but I'll just leave it. You can see this slide. The key elements are graphically presented in the only graph in the whole document is on the right, where it talks about the program team, describe the water systems, analyze the building water systems, establish control measures and corrective actions when you're out of control. And a huge, very important part is the what we call auditing the water management plan. Show me that you are doing what you said you're going to do, and then show me that what you're doing is correct, is working. That's what we call verification and validation. And you'll see later on that I'll have another slide that documentation is just so important. If that's not done, it didn't happen. I mean, I always say we have to document, and communicate all activities of our water management plan. And, of course, that's what TELS does best for you. That is, key to, having, this approach to managing this disease. So we've got, I think, a couple more questions. We're running like 2 or 3 minutes. So, Brian, let's see what we can do these real quick.
Okay.
What is routine sampling or testing for Legionella? Because we've touched on that, and I'll just kind of give you a leading question. Is it required by the ASHRAE Standard? And I'll give you an extra credit question if you can answer. Is it required by the CMS memorandum to do routine sampling for Legionella?
Okay. ASHRAE 188, and I'm going to always give Bill a little bit of a hard time about this, could not come to a consensus for required testing. So, no, the standard does not require testing. And then the next one is CMS. There was a little bit of ambiguity on that one. We are on our third iteration of the CMS mandate. We are in, I think it's published number 3. And it actually does not say you have to test. But what it does say is it does say that you have to consult your local authority having jurisdiction for testing. Our company and Bill and I are very big proponents of a proactive versus a reactive situation. So 3 states, and I'll get to that in a second, 3 states now actually, the state of New York, if you're in a healthcare facility that is a critical access hospital, a skilled nursing facility or hospital, is required to do testing. Pennsylvania, if you're under the Veterans Administration, if you actually treat veterans, you do have to do testing, and I can point you to that exact document if you have any questions on that. And third, New Jersey, it's kind of up in the air a little bit, but what the New Jersey Department of Health has put out is they have put out a document that says they are looking for testing. That has been a kind of a slippery slope. Some say yes, some say no, and I'm sure everybody on this, surveyors, I give them a world of credit, but I don't think, some of them, it just depends. Some of them are asking for it, some of them are not. And then there's one other one. It's the state of Nevada, and I think it's actually, I'm trying to remember the exact county. I don't have it off the top of my head. It does require testing, but it is in healthcare facilities only. So back to that proactive versus reactive. Let me hit my little slide here. What we always say is, how do you know? If you aren't testing and doing routine sampling, how would you know if you have Legionella in your building? Well, I guess the one way you could do it is if you have a confirmed case, and then that opens up a whole can of worms that Bill and I deal with on a daily basis. Literally every single day we're dealing with one of our clients on a confirmed case and what to do with that. So sometimes we are big proponents of getting out ahead of it. If you find it, what can we do to minimize your risk and to remediate or get rid of it in your building? What do you think, Bill? Did I get an A on that one?
Yeah, and I'll just say one quick thing because I know we need to move on. But a lot of people get confused about testing. When we talk about routine sampling testing, we're talking about validating our water management plan. Our water management plan says, hey, we got a plan to manage Legionella. And so part of that plan says you got to validate if indeed you have managed it. I don't know any other way than to test for it. Now, they can do it passively and say, well, we're not having any disease. Yeah, okay. You just keep on going, but you're just waiting for it to happen. If you will be proactive, test, and here the testing is where you can do something real quick and without a Department of Health telling you that you got to get 0 on every single sample. When they get involved, and I like the note that you put on that number 10 question, Brian, the approach to routine sampling in the absence of the disease, when you're using it to validate your water management plan, that's one thing. But, boy, when you are involved with an outbreak or a case, then you're going to have a Department of Health telling you increase your sampling, and they will not accept anything hardly other than a non-detectable sample, and they will hold the building, they will hold you responsible for doing whatever it takes, remediating time after time after time, and that's a difficult road to go down. So, great job on that. We're going to flip to number 11, and I will speed it up because we've already talked about CMS. This was the memorandum and directive that I think turned, our world appropriately, correctly upside down, because for the first time, an authority having jurisdiction says, you need to have a water management plan, and you need to be doing something about controlling this bacteria that can cause Legionnaire's disease. And so the CDC has told us for decades, really, many years, and a lot of us have. The water treatment industry has. Other experts have been saying what you should be doing, but most people aren't going to do anything unless they got to. So the CMS, if you're involved with them, you have to. And so I think that's pretty clear. And so we get to come down to our last question before we have Q&A time. And, Brian, you get this one again. So we didn't say this early on, but let me set the stage for you. I gave a webinar last year with an attorney, and it was to a group of attorneys. It was the International Defense Council. And my opening slide as a, quote, Legionella subject matter expert was letting all these attorneys know that Legionnaire's disease cases are on the rise. That's what we started off with this webinar. The attorney's first opening slide was litigation cases are on the increase. So none of us want to be in court, and I'm not trying to throw out a scare card, but unfortunately we have a lot of litigation associated with this disease because more and more we're being told it's preventable. And if you're not doing something to prevent it, you can't get away with, well, I didn't know I could, or I'm not that familiar with it. You can't put yourself on the mercy of the court today since it's been around for 43 years, but it's been very prominently around in the U.S. since the standard. There is a standard of care out there where you've got to get negligence off the table. So I'm scared, Brian. How can I mitigate my risk as much as possible, as a citizen or a building owner?
I think we talked about this, and we've hit it through the questions as we've gone through there. I'm going to spend another 50 seconds on this, and I'll speak really slow. Remember I said, and I didn't mean to scare everybody, I actually wrote it on here because I sometimes forget to say this. So I'll read it. The CDC states that even when the facility does everything correctly, there is still a 10% chance that you will get a case of Legionella pneumonia in many healthcare facilities and settings. And last, remember I told everybody, ASHRAE 180 is what we call a living document. It's under continuous maintenance. It's going to continuously change. Part of our service and part of what we have built our business around in our solution with direct supply is we maintain those changes for you because it is a full-time job. We have a team here at our company that takes care of all that. And lastly, if you do a water management plan, okay, kudos. If you already have one, awesome job. I give everybody a great deal of credit. They are kind of cumbersome, but make sure that your data is scientifically backed. Make sure that you have followed the ASHRAE standard on what you need to do for your control measures. Make sure you are documenting. okay? Because what's going to happen, and Bill has been an expert witness many a times, is that negligence claims. You want to be able to have, and this is probably bad for me to say, Bill can hit me later, is you want that get out of jail free card, what that statement by the CDC says. If you do everything correctly and you still get it, well, guess what? You have done everything correctly. It's very hard for someone to come in and claim negligence. So that's pretty much, and I went over by a minute, sorry about that. But that's how we can mitigate those risks as much as possible. Bill, anything else?
No, let's leave it to the audience. We're
okay.
Kind of monopolizing this, and I hope Robin's got a bunch of questions for us.
I sure do. All right, so we'll jump right in. If anyone else has questions besides the one that have been submitted, please feel free to enter them in the chat feature on the side of your webinar. So our first question is, do you know if there's a lab in Florida to test for this, and is the test covered by most insurance companies?
So are we speaking about to test the water system or to test a patient? I think that would be but I'll handle the water system, and Bill, you can probably handle the patient side of it with the insurance. Not that we know of. Some insurance companies, actually, I will say this. I did have a client that one of their insurance companies did have a case of Legionnaire's disease, and their insurance company did cover all of the testing and all of the remediation. So I can say yes to that. Labs, our lab, any lab, there's labs all over the country. What I will say, if you are going to be testing your water, make sure it is a CDC Elite certified lab. There are many of them. You can Google them, and they'll pop up. But one thing I will caution you on is when you do a test, and this is where Bill and I do so much work on a day-to-day basis, is interpretation of those tests. It's very difficult if you just get something that comes back and says, oh, well, what's that mean? So make sure you hire a competent individual that can help you with those tests.
Yeah, I'll quickly say, you can't. The CDC actually keeps a listing of laboratories throughout the United States that meet their program, but their program is not really a proficiency program. I just want to let you know that there are other sources of labs that do have certification, third-party certification, and you need to look for those. If they can provide you a document that they're following the ISO procedures for testing. Mm-hmm. And I, too, was a bit confused on the question. I apologize. If they were talking about testing for Legionella, like testing water, they are. Mm-hmm. They're clearly in Florida and in all the states. You would just, again, for lack of anything else, you could Google it, but then it's always good to have someone else to give you some references who knows about this type of information. But that would be true, the testing down there. The insurance, I'm not too sure. I know there are insurance policies that say that are starting to come out that if you do not have a water management plan, they will not cover cases. Yeah, let's go to the next one.
All right. So my building water has been at 110, and the temp and shower heads are changed every 6 months. Is this a practice that we should still be keeping in place?
I'll jump on that real quick. When he says the building temps are maintained at 110, boy, that's right there, just above the sweet spot. We know that's not killing Legionella, and we know right around there, a little lower, it's had the opportunity to really, really, really grow. And you can't be assured 110 is everywhere. The standing rule of thumb is, and here's where it gets tough, with our audience, because I'm part of that healthcare scene. You should produce and store water at 140 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and you should deliver it to your end use, to your faucets, to your shower heads, at 120 or higher. That's what most of the Legionella experts, and I know we're now crossing over into that area for scald risk, and there are things out there that can be done, with that. So it's a tough question. That's a pretty costly, labor-intensive, and otherwise to be changing these shower heads every 6 months. But they are known to, if you do have the temperatures that promote the growth of biofilm in the bacteria, that may be the only way you can regularly, reduce that, get it out.
Great. I'm going to combine two kind of similar questions here. Two people are asking about ponds, and one is asking if they need any treatment, and the other is asking specifically about a pond with turtles in it, and if there are products that can be used for the fountain and the pond that won't hurt the turtles.
Well, two things. First of all, when he's saying ponds, I don't know if he's talking about, spray ponds or, water features. Remember, if you just have a pond and there's nothing spraying water or aerosolizing it, that represents a very low risk, no more risk than an environmental pond that's going to have turtles and fish and other life in it. And even if it's an ornamental feature pond where there is spraying of water, then you can do several things. What's good about that is there is you probably don't have the temperature that gets up into the high, what we call sweet spot range. And if it's a decorative type of a fountain or pond, I keep going back to that word, pond's kind of thrown me, but or fountain, do not use incandescent lighting that beneath the surface. Make sure that lighting is LED source. Again, I'm going back to that heat. Anything can keep the temperature of the pond down. And if it's not one where you've got a lot of other live turtles or fish or something else, if it's strictly what we call a water feature, ornamental, then it should be treated. It should be treated with a disinfectant.
All right. Great. Thank you. Next question is, my soda and ice machine are high risk. How do I prevent Legionnaire from flowing through?
Okay. There's a lot to say about that. It's high risk because, I'm sure this is a healthcare setting. And, that's where, the connection with ice machines was discovered there at UPMC Medical in 2013, and it surprised everybody because we've been talking about, you got to have, hot tub water, you got to have real warm water, 100-degree water, etc. And we're going, how can you get Legionnaire's disease from an ice machine? And then you got to just look back at the fact that, you've got city water coming in that probably has or could have very, very low levels of Legionella, which aren't a problem, but then you send that water through. Usually the final thing of a ice machine is a carbon filter, which takes out any disinfectant. Then you let it reside in several feet of copper tubing or coiled up, behind the machine, so you can move the machine out and work on it from time to time. And all that copper tubing with that stagnant water, what we talked about earlier, low flow, no flow, high temperature, low or no disinfectant. Where does it get the temperature? This coiling is right up against the heat-generating part of the ice machine. So there we've got all those favorable conditions. So we're seeing all that equipment being redesigned. But I digress there just a moment because it is an important subject, and I would recommend that, number one, you always follow the manufacturer's recommendations. That industry has learned, now that their equipment is associated, with potentially allowing this waterborne pathogen to grow and be high risk, they are redesigning some of their features not to have that excess coiled water, especially where it gets heated, the favorable conditions. Maybe not using the carbon filter and to continue some disinfectant, or using other filters. And that's another. I apologize, we're really rambling here. But there are point-of-use filters, and there is filtration that can be done, to filter Legionella out.
Perfect, Bill. And Robin, I hate to say this, I think I'm getting a quick one. It says, where can you get test kits? It came straight to me. I don't know if you saw that also. Yeah. But I just wanted to ask that real quick. Direct Supply is your single source for getting all those test kits, and all those test kits are interpreted by Bill and myself. So Robin, just want to answer that real quick because I don't know if you got that. It just was sent straight to me.
Yep, I appreciate that. Okay, next question. We test water flow on our fire system. And during that test, is there a risk factor when this water flows onto the ground, and should precautions be taken in the areas where the water's dispersed?
Okay, so he's talking about, I assume, his fire suppression system, sprinkler system, and a very good question. You know, there you've got the water that's probably stagnant, and whatever disinfectant it had, it's gone. Anybody who's been involved with those systems, when you open them up or when you release the water, they're usually red and full of rust, you know, the corrosive and all. So, again, what you want to worry about is anything that's going to aerosolize that water. If you're going to produce a spray or an aerosolization, and this goes along with a lot of the equipment that has to be maintained and cleaned, like included in the cooling tower, then the recommendation is the people who are really involved with that they have you don't have to have a Scott's Air pack or full dressed up suit. You just need to have a mask that covers the nose and the mouth, that what we call a HEPA 95 mask, and that will effectively filter out any aerosols that, even if it contain Legionella, you would not be able to inhale them. That's the root. It's got to be aerosolized in these respirable sized water droplets, and you got to breathe them in to your lungs. And then again, I'm not minimizing this. You know, the only good news there is about Legionnaire's disease. Only about 5% of the general population is at risk. Healthy people, we breathe in Legionella, and we're just the fortunate ones that don't get the Legionella pneumonia. Our sickest people, that 75%, they're really at high risk, but the rest of us, it's small. But in this case, protect yourself. Have a little mask filter. You don't have to worry about gloves. Like Brian said, you know, you don't get it by touching the water or anything like that. You have to breathe it in.
So here's one more. Is Legionella a slow-growth bacteria, and how often do we need to flush the water lines to prevent it from buildup?
Hey, first of all, I got to do the first part, Brian. That's a great question. And number one, it is what we call a fastidious, organism. It is a slow growth. That's what adds to the fact when you send it out to a lab, a sample of water to get it cultured, it takes at least 5 or 7 days before you can even get an indication, and then to confirm it and all, it usually goes into 10 days or 14 days before you get your results back. So it is slow growing, and it does have particular requirements. And so what was the second part of the question?
What can we do about flushing? And that's what a very good water management plan is designed to do. Yep. It will actually spell out, and remember, this is all backed by science. So the World Health Organization, ASHRAE Guideline 12, which is going to be coming out again here pretty soon, a new update. They all give you guidance on that. But a very good water management plan will actually state when to flush, how to flush, where to flush. And remember, those risk factors I talked about, identify those risk factors, have a very good scientifically backed control measure to go with them based on ASHRAE 188 and that CDC toolkit. That is the best way to reduce your risk in your building.
Yeah, I just want to add, because this is a healthcare audience, we have those floors, or we have those rooms, or we have those showers and faucets that aren't used for long periods of time, and that's just a red flag. A water management plan for those pieces of equipment or areas would include what Brian just talked about, a regular flushing program. Flushing program is the only way to get the old out that has no disinfectant and get new water in which does have disinfectant.
And I'll put one last thing, and then Robin, I'm sure, is going to go on to something else. Bill and I have been to many, many places around this country, and you think the Safe Water Drinking Act does require a certain amount of disinfectant, but, you might be on the last part of the line in one of these buildings. And I'm just going to give you a quick idea. We have tested incoming water that has zero disinfectant, absolutely zero chlorine in the system altogether. So make sure when you do those water management plans, it is a very good idea to actually get those disinfectant levels. All right. Sorry, Robin.
I appreciate all of the great answers, and thank you all for sending in your questions. And now please join me in welcoming our TELS trainer, Dave Race, who will be showing you some of the tools that are available for Legionella management and planning on the TELS platform and how to get those test kits that you've been asking about.
Great. Thank you very much, Robin. And thank you, Brian and Bill. That was a lot of great information. And, of course, thank you, everyone that's listening and watching on the webinar. A lot of great questions. If you want to hear more from Brian Waymire, he will be at our TELS Summit, which is going to be on May 22nd and May 23rd of this year, coming up very quickly. It is the only conference in the world dedicated to senior living building management. So it's a great conference, the TELS Summit. You can find that on the Direct Supply TELS site. I just want to point out some of the tasks that are in your TELS platform that can help you with your Legionella management. Not only do we have some tasks that are dedicated to this, along with areas to store your plan, we also have some resources that you can use to learn more about it and to actually build your plan and build how you're going to manage and do your water systems. So first, I'm going to click on the training tab in the TELS platform, and I'll just very quickly point out the Legionella management section. We have an entire section dedicated to that. We do have a copy of the CDC toolkit that was mentioned several times today. That is right here in the TELS platform. We also have a sample of a flow diagram. So if you're going to put together a flow diagram to understand how the water flows through your community, understand where some of them pain points are, you will need to put together that flow diagram. Take a look at this example. It'll really help you get started with creating your own. We have a Legionella water management template, a sample, and how to put together your monitoring plan. We also have a risk assessment. So you're going to be able to assess the risk in your community, kind of determine where you need to be with management and putting together your plan. And then we also have how to put together your written plan. So this is the Legionella section under the training tab in the TELS platform, a great resource to learn more, to get started on your Legionella mitigation plan. Under the task section, we do have 2 dedicated tasks for Legionella. We have our water systems testing and monitoring task. So not only if you have to test and if you have to monitor on a regular basis, not only can you use our best practice task, which is going to link you to the F tag in this case. You can read right from the CMS code right in the TELS platform. You are also able to read through the instructions, and these are good, comprehensive instructions that can really help you when you're doing your monitoring plan. We also offer logs as well. So you will need to log some of this information, that you tested certain areas, that you flushed certain things. All of those things should be logged in TELS. We can actually set up that log, work with your maintenance persons at the building, set that up so that you can document that on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, whatever it is that you are required to do. One more task I want to point out very, very quickly is the Legionella Water Management Plan Review. So here, again, we're going to link you to the tags that are related to that particular item. But what you'll notice here is we have links to our resources, including the CDC toolkit, which you can, of course, go right on the training tab and view as well. But we have a great comprehensive set of instructions that are really going to help you put together that plan, make sure that it is correct for your community, make sure that it is going to work for you, and we also offer a place where you can store that document. You'll know that it's safe. It's going to be located in TELS, and as was discussed earlier by Brian and Bill, remember, this is going to be a living document. This is your plan that you are going to need to modify. You're going to need to update as time goes on. So you want to make sure that you have it saved in the TELS platform where you can easily access it. You'll be able to update and modify that plan as needs require, or as CMS regulations or the ASHRAE guidelines change. Modify that, resave it into the TELS platform for safekeeping. For those of you that feel overwhelmed, or maybe you don't have the time or the staff to begin, or you may have elevated risks in your community, TELS Building Services is here to help as well. As noted by Brian earlier, what's required by CMS regulations is a compliant water management plan. By contracting with TELS, we can help your community or your corporation develop site-specific plans via on-site service or smart plan app development methods. Once established, TELS platform will load tasks based on control measures within your plan, document the plan itself, and work with innovative water consulting to maintain compliance should ASHRAE guidelines change. Depending on your AHJ or your authority having jurisdiction, testing may also be required, and TELS can help here as well. As was mentioned earlier, test kits can be ordered online at directsupply.net simply by searching Legionella, or you can simply also contact your account manager at Direct Supply. Lastly, if your community has had an incident or is at higher levels of risk, Legionella mitigation services such as preventative maintenance, investigation services, or remediation are available through TELS Building Services, and they're documented and tracked within your TELS platform account. For questions or to get started on your TELS water management plan, simply email watermanagement@tels.net or call 1-800-667-3880.
Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you again to Bill and Brian for your time today. For more information about upcoming webinars, please visit directsupply.com/webinars. Once again, thank you for attending today.